For all its power and influence, the communist Soviet Union failed to topple America during the Cold War. They had advanced weaponry, a massive military, and footholds just miles off our coast like Cuba. The communist ideology was growing in Southeast Asia, the Korean Peninsula, and Central America. The Soviet Empire controlled all of Eastern Europe. Communism in the 20th century in many ways looked inevitable. One thing was standing in the Soviets' way, and that was America, land of the free, a country that was a living rebuke to an ideology that seeks to control individual expression and thought, all in the pursuit of bringing heaven to earth, when in reality, the only thing that communism has ever brought is hell on earth. What's the one thing the Soviets failed to consider in doing in their communist quest for world dominance? That's, well, just buy Americans off. That's right. Just dangle cold, hard cash or cool electronic trinkets in front of the Americans and then watch as American companies, American media, and celebrities bend a knee to communists to keep that money and those trinkets coming, one cargo container at a time. The Soviets never stumbled onto this ploy. Had they figured it out, though, they likely would have won the Cold War, and today we would be pledging our allegiance to the Kremlin rather than the United States of America. The latest example of America being bought off by China and by communism, period, well, just look what's going on with actor John Cena, who is out promoting his new film, Fast and Furious 9. Apparently, he offended the CCP. How? Well, John Cena said something very, very bad, wrong thing. He had the audacity to call Taiwan a country. Now, you might be thinking, but Dana, Taiwan is a country. And you would be right. But the CCP thinks that this particular free country, its functioning democracy, is actually their territory, and they want to take it back. When John Cena realized that calling Taiwan a country angered the CCP, he apologized to the communists in Mandarin, which he's learning to promote wrestling. Watch.
我有一个错误，我必须说，现在就是很重要。我爱更尊重中国，更中国人。我很抱歉对我的错误，对不起，我很抱歉。你必须了解，我很爱、很尊重中国跟中国人。不好意思，再见。
This is so depressing because John Cena seems like a genuinely nice guy. But if you don't understand what's going on, I want to help you kind of see this for what it is. John Cena and Hollywood, you know, they love money. People, I mean, capitalism is great, but the worship of money isn't. And all the money in America and the free world apparently isn't enough for some folks. They want a bigger slice of what is becoming one of the biggest markets of all, China. Fast and Furious, the franchise, has historically done very well in China. In fact, this last weekend, Fast and Furious 9 just made $135 million. So when the CCP tells you that they don't appreciate you calling Taiwan a country, what do you do if you're in Hollywood? You do what you always do. You sell out, and fast, before your movie's banned by the CCP. You bow down and you kiss the red clown shoes of President Xi Jinping, who really, I mean, he's a tyrannical dictator. He's a communist, and he's permanently appointed himself the leader of China. You could be tempted to get mad at John Cena, and really, you should be, because for all of his muscle, it seems that he lacks a spine. Or maybe John Cena just isn't that bright. I mean, it's a possibility. Here's some Jack Handy-like deep thoughts that he recently tweeted out. We turned them into corporate posters to demonstrate just how intellectually shallow Cena's tweets actually can kind of be, considering what he just did here in bending a knee to China. Transform your chaos into possibility. That's some pretty deep stuff. Our flaws are more beautiful than our filters. Yeah, very inspirational. And the last tweet from just hours ago seems to be reflecting the angst that he's currently feeling after bowing to China. Chaos will always find its way into life. It can serve as a reminder to be grateful to those we love and to those who love us. Okay. So, I mean, no one is expecting John Cena to be Socrates, and he doesn't have to be. I mean, he's an entertainer, he's an actor, he's an athlete. Like I said, he seems really nice. I don't enjoy having to criticize him here, but, you know, he's paid a lot of money to pretend well. And when his career ends, and it will, John Cena, I don't know, maybe he can go write for Hallmark. Or maybe he can go find a job with CCP. Maybe he could come up with some new corporate posters, maybe a new one like this. When the CCP tells you to apologize, obey them so the rivers of money keep flowing. But seriously, his apology to CCP is dumb. It just demonstrates a lack of awareness. Taiwan is an American ally. It is a free country, a functioning democracy. It has a free press and a free people. We support them as we should support freedom everywhere in the world. China, on the other hand, is a geopolitical bully, a communist regime that supports outlaw states like North Korea, a country that builds military bases in international waters because they feel like it. They disappear journalists and religious leaders and scientists because they can. Nobody does a thing about it. Criticize the CCP leadership, and you might not ever be seen again. Maybe John Cena doesn't know that China has detention camps where they've detained 1 million Muslims, well, the Uyghurs in northern China. Some even call this genocide by the CCP, because it is, because of the forced labor and sterilization of these people. So why does the CCP do this? Because Uyghurs and their beliefs, they're Muslim. CCP doesn't like their, what they call extremist views. Communists aren't really big on religion because they much prefer you worship them, the government. Religion is competition to the government. But we're not done with the CCP, and we think it's important to understand really who they really are. It's a regime that socially scores its citizens. So if you're a Chinese citizen, make sure you clap really loud when President Xi Jinping speaks and say all the right things on social media about the Communist Party, or you might actually find your social score lowered and your very few freedoms taken away. China is also a country that plays around with viruses in labs, doing gain-of-function experiments, and it looks like one of those little pathogens slipped out the door in the fall of 2019 and infected the entire world, killing over 3 million people. Maybe it killed someone that you know and love. But hey, accidents happen, right? This is a country that ignores intellectual property laws. They just open up American devices, our technologies, and they rip them off. Just ask Apple. Actually, don't ask Apple, because Apple would never actually criticize China, and because Apple and so many other companies are using very cheap factory labor in China so they can pay less to make their products, enrich the CCP, and then charge Americans boatloads of cash for those same exact products. Meanwhile, China's busy taking all the money they make off of selling stuff to America and using it to buy off greedy American institutions and individuals like Hollywood and John Cena. But honestly, we've bashed John Cena and Hollywood and corporate America enough. Yes, they deserve it, but they're also full of virtue, except when it hits their pocketbooks. But maybe it's time that we actually be honest and take a hard look in the mirror and ask ourselves a question. Are we all a little bit John Cena? I mean, if we're honest, we've all gotten used to cheap stuff from China. We like our iPhones. We like our video games. We like TikTok, I don't, and Zoom, some of you do. We like cheap furniture and toys. We don't like it when John Cena's bought off by China. And he was, let's be honest, it's disgusting. But maybe we ought to put down our own stones long enough to realize that we are all guilty to some degree of the exact same thing which we find him guilty of. We've all stood by as Americans and we watched while China invaded a free Hong Kong and violated every basic treaty and agreement they've ever made. And while they stole Hong Kong's freedom, very few people spoke up. I mean, sure, Daryl Morey, former general manager of the Houston Rockets, he spoke up, but then LeBron James and the NBA told him to shut up because, hey, wouldn't want the CCP to cut off that lucrative Chinese market, and that's disgusting too. But then many of us kept watching the NBA, didn't we? And then there was America's favorite pastime, Major League Baseball, deciding it would ink media deals with communist China to gain access to the Chinese market while pulling the All-Star game out of Georgia. MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred insisted that pulling the game from the majority black city of Atlanta was the best way, he said, to demonstrate our values as a sport. Yes, we see those questionable values, Major League Baseball, but here's a question directed at us, the American fans. Are you still buying MLB merchandise? You still tuning into the games? I know a lot of us are. Our major newspapers accept money from the CCP to run advertisements styled as news stories, advertorials, according to our own Justice Department. Are you still subscribing to and reading those major newspapers? Like Time Magazine? Others, many millions of Americans most definitely are. Recently, one of our congressmen, Democrat Eric Swalwell, and 2 mayors were reportedly mixed up with a Chinese spy. Apparently, money isn't the only thing that CCP uses to help buy American influence. Did Swalwell pay a price? Nope. He's still in office. He's still an elected official with a career ahead of him. A Harvard professor was recently arrested by the FBI for hiding payments and ties with China, but we keep sending our kids to these same colleges. I could go on and on. You get the point. And again, that point is this. Maybe we've all become a bunch of John Cenas, ill-informed and greedy Americans who prize money and toys over our core principles like freedom and the defense of liberty. Maybe we don't believe that freedom is worth speaking up for anymore. I mean, who cares about Hong Kong and the Uyghurs and the people of Taiwan? Who cares about the Wuhan virus whistleblowers from China, people that were locked up for trying to warn the world? We got TikTok and our access to cheap Chinese labor. We're good. Well, maybe it's time we all thought more about what we're buying and from whom we're buying it from, right? Who are we getting these products from? We're all guilty of it. John Cena deserves the criticism. So does Hollywood. So does the NBA. So does Major League Baseball. So do these greedy corporations. Not one of those entities would do what they're doing if we actually punish them with our consumer behavior. And I think we need to start doing that. Buy American as much as possible. Buy from our true friends and allies as much as possible. Otherwise, we Americans should just admit to ourselves that maybe we care more about money than standing up for freedom and liberty. One thing's for certain, the Chinese Communist Party thinks we care more about money. And after John Cena's sad public apology, they might be right. Up next, Dave Rubin joins us to not just continue this conversation, but talk about a bunch more. What about risks in freedom? Isn't that what freedom's all about? We'll discuss that and more. Keep it here. Today's episode is brought to you in part by IPVanish. IPVanish is a virtual private network, a VPN for short. VPNs are super important tools that help you safely browse the internet. And you can use a VPN on your computers, your tablet, your phone, even things like your Fire Stick when you're streaming media. And when you use the VPN, all of your data is encrypted. What you're reading, what you're searching, what you're watching, it's all protected. And if you care about the security of your online activity, the easiest way to protect yourself is with IPVanish's VPN. Rated 4.5 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot, IPVanish provides an encrypted connection for all your internet traffic, helping to prevent websites, Wi-Fi providers, and even hackers from intercepting your data. And you can help keep your financial details, personal information, and online activity safe from threats with IPVanish. Get started with this limited time offer and save 50% off monthly and annual subscriptions by going to ipvanish.com/DanaTV. That's ipvanish.com/DanaTV. As we just discussed, Americans are bending the knee to China and we all have a major consumption problem, to be honest. To expand on this and much more, we're joined by my friend, Dave Rubin, host of the Rubin Report. Dave, always good to see you. Appreciate your time, my friend. But wait, before we get going, have you moved to Texas yet?
Oh, God, who put you up to this? I've got the entire state of Texas and Florida, by the way, with like major welcome wagon situations just ready for me to make the move. I'm fighting a little bit longer. Let's see if we can make this recall thing happen with Gavin Newsom and get rid of this ridiculous Disney cartoon character of a governor. And then I will make some life decisions. How was that for an answer?
I'll accept that for now. But we can get a welcoming committee to welcome you here to the awesome Republic of Texas and show you like some brisket. We can do a brisket flight of the different briskets because we are so awash in meat freedom that we can offer that here in the Republic of Texas and go down to the Alamo. Maybe.
I was at Glenn Beck's ranch outside of Dallas, and I think he basically offered me a horse. So we're working on it. We're working on it.
Yeah, free horse when you move to Texas. Who knows? I mean, well, I'll throw whatever you want. We need more people here. We need more people like you here. And Florida's nice. No offense to Florida. Okay, so I know you were talking about, Dave, you were talking about the John Cena thing as well. And I don't want to be mean to him and just unnecessarily malicious, but that's kind of a big deal because he's sort of like the Mr. America of WWE, and he's representing the United States going over to try to integrate wrestling to China. He's promoting Fast and Furious 9. But Taiwan is a country, and the fact that he had to apologize for this and that he would even agree to apologize for this, I mean, that was stunning. What are your thoughts on that when you saw that video?
Yeah, well, first off, I like the way you frame that it's not like I just want to jump in on the pylon on John Cena right now. He's taking it from everybody, but for good reason. Yes, Taiwan is a country. I apologize to my Chinese overlords by saying it, but it is a country. That's number one. Number two, I mean, watching Cena fold is very much it's like watching LeBron James fold. These people get into these situations over their head into geopolitical questions and things that they really know nothing about. And then, when they get to what they do know about, which is either basketball or wrestling or acting, well, then they go, oh, I want to keep that gig, right? I mean, LeBron James wants his basketball gig. He doesn't want to upset the NBA, which is very tight with China, obviously. So he'll rail on America all day, but won't say a word about Chinese human rights abuses. And in many cases, that's what John Cena is doing here, too. We know exactly what this is. Like, this isn't, you don't have to dig too deep to figure out what's going on here. The guy wants to sell tickets to his movies. We know that Hollywood in many ways has, over the last couple of years, really sold out America and the American dream and American values for the Chinese market. And the thing that's been on my mind lately is, when will people really stand up for America? Not wrestlers pretending that they're pro-American, but like people like us and the good people that watch our shows. When will we basically be like, you know what? America isn't for sale anymore. The things that are good about America are not for sale, and we got to stand up and fight for them. I think that time's coming, but can't come too soon.
I think, Dave, you bring up a really good point with this, because it's really hard to analyze the Cena situation and kind of point fingers at him without also indicting some of our own consumer behavior. I mean, maybe we're not going over there and saying that Taiwan isn't a country, but we've all of us, there's not a single person that hasn't purchased something from China because it's, we just didn't want to do the legwork into buying an alternative, or we just, we're lazy. And I think that how much does consumer behavior come into this? And do you think that that's something that can really be altered on a national scale to hit China where it counts in the pocketbook?
It's a great question, because you're totally right. We all, we can talk about this stuff, but then at the end of the day, we are creatures of habit. We're creatures of ease. We can get things delivered to us very easily. With all the pushback that you might want to give against, say, a company like Disney with all of their woke stuff and critical race theory stuff, how many people actually canceled Disney Plus to fight it? So in many ways, we fund the very corporations and countries that are coming for our rights. I don't know, can you get to like a really sort of collective number of people who would stop buying certain products or cancel a certain amount of streaming services to get companies and corporations and then countries to change course? I'm not totally sure. But again, on the Cena thing, it's like, you got to imagine, this guy's just an actor in a big movie. But the amount of people that he's around, whether it's the studio execs or the agents or his business managers or everybody else, and everyone's trying to get their piece. Oh, I want John Cena to make money because I want my cut. I want my 10% of John Cena's contract and all the rest of it. That's just the nature of the business. So all of the advice around him is, apologize, because we don't want to piss off the Chinese, because actually we want our money too. So it's a little bit of human nature. It's not just as easy as, John Cena doesn't stand for anything. It's like he's surrounded by people whose incentives are all out of whack with standing up for America. And maybe that's a uniquely American problem that we have to deal with.
It seems like it's becoming a uniquely worldwide problem, because the Chinese influence is so ubiquitous. I mean, in gaming, so I am a casual gamer. I'm not a heavy. I was before I had kids, but I'm a casual gamer. And I really didn't want to go out and get Call of Duty because of the whole thing with Activision and Blizzard and Tencent being involved. And then, of course, there was the Tom Cruise film, Top Gun, the sequel to that, where they didn't have the Taiwan flag or the Taiwan's flag or Japan's flag on Maverick's jacket. And now, I mean, there is nowhere in terms of games, entertainment, or anything where you can look and not find their influence. And to that point, one of my favorite stories about this involves Quentin Tarantino. And I was thinking earlier, in a world of John Cena's, why can't more people be like Quentin Tarantino? Because when Tarantino did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Chinese regulators, in order to get his film on all the screens over in China, they wanted him to re-edit the part where the scene where Bruce Lee was in, because they wanted Bruce Lee to be more prominent and maybe not be embarrassed by Brad Pitt's character, which that was an epic scene. And Quentin Tarantino told China to go pound sand. So that movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, did not get a Chinese theater showing. Not everybody has Quentin Tarantino go screw yourself money. No, not everybody has that, but that's unique in Hollywood.
Dana, you're not going to believe this, but I actually fell asleep about halfway through Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, so I sense you just told me something that I didn't know, and I know everyone has said there's something crazy at the end. I think you might have just tipped me off. That's all right. It's been out
It's in
for
the middle.
years.
It's kind of in the middle. I swear I did not give anything away. I promise.
That's fully on me. By the way, you're a Call of Duty lady. I'm more of a Super Mario Brothers kind of guy, but that,
okay.
Different strokes for different folks. That's fine. Look, we need some people, in this case, like Quentin Tarantino, you need some of the executives, some of the directors, some of the people that fund these things to say, hey, we're funding things and we want them to be sold to an American market. And, partly what happens here is that because Hollywood in the last, say, 20 years went so heavy on massive blockbusters, right? We had to just pump out superhero movies and garbage Transformers movies and more Star Wars movies. We had to make these huge things that cost a ton of money, but that amount of money would be dwarfed by the amount of money it would bring in. Well, we could go back to something that would be a little more American per se, which is let's do some smaller budget, tight things and sell them to an American market and actually not worry that much what the Chinese public or the Chinese Communist Party might think about our American movies. Like, return this stuff to America, but don't expect that Disney's going to do it. It's like, you know, we have to find new people that are funding things. And by the way, there are some conservative movements now to start funding new movies, new entertainment. You and I know some of the people doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that they're doing that. And I want to support their efforts in pursuing that too, because it's just where do you turn anymore? I feel so guilty whenever I order something and I think that I've done the legwork and it says, oh, made in China on it. And I actually feel guilt. Like, I have a crazy story and I'll bring the tugboat to shore. I promise it won't be long. But I ran down over lockdown. I like to bake and I ran down a marble pastry board. It's impossible to get something like that that's all sourced and made in the United States. It took me 2 months. I found Italian marble, but it was made in Taiwan. Taiwan hates China. China hates Taiwan. It was a win-win situation. But that was just one item. I don't expect, and nor could I or you or anybody else do that with every single purchase, every single bit of consumer behavior that we have in our lives. So how does this even start while also respecting the individual freedom of choice?
Yeah, well, look, Dana, where did America get most of its PPE at the height of COVID? We got it from China. And you're not going to believe this, but now what once was a conspiracy theory that nobody was allowed to talk about, this idea that perhaps COVID came from a lab in Wuhan, well, now suddenly we are kind of talking about it. And Trump did say it about a year ago. So our relationship with China is just so tight. And you're right, for the average person, it's like you don't want to open your phone and go, man, you know, I want a baking board, or I want to get, you know, whatever it might be, paper towels, and have to figure out where it was sourced. But we have an asymmetry in the relationship with China. And by the way, I'm not sitting here like saying China is wholly awful or evil or whatever. We also, unfortunately, have some pretty terrible leaders in the United States who make bad trade deals. That orange guy, remember him? He tried to reverse some of that stuff. But we're only subject to the rules that we can play by. So if our government is giving these favorable deals to China and then all of the products come in cheaper and you at the end of the day have to look at how much you're making and you have a family and all these things, and it's like, the stuff from China is cheaper. I'd rather not support China, but I also have to put food on the table and et cetera, et cetera. It's like we have a tough Faustian bargain that we all have to negotiate.
Yeah, I agree. Talking to Dave Rubin. Dave, one thing I wanted to ask you, I love this tweet that you actually retweeted something. You were looking at a sign in a business that was, discussing the mask, and it said it was about eliminating all risk. We have to make sure that we eliminate the virus, eliminate the risk of catching it, which it's a virus. You're just going to acclimate and be proactive. You're never going to actually eliminate it. But eliminating all risk, that seems to be like one of the part of the soul of what's happening with the lockdown, and everybody seems to. There's not everybody, but some people are struggling. Some of our brethren are struggling coming out of being told what to do and how to live their lives by the CDC and going out mask-free. Rachel Maddow saying that she had to rewire how she was thinking so she wasn't offended if she saw someone with a naked face.
Well, Rachel Maddow, she should rewire how she's thinking, but that has nothing to do with COVID.
Yeah, but the risk though, I mean, where do we seem to have gotten this idea that liberty means that you're guaranteed to not ever risk anything or have any kind of consequence of risk.
Yeah, well, those who would trade in liberty for safety deserve neither, right? I mean, that's what we've sort of done here. The idea that somehow the government or the CDC or the WHO or some organization above you can magically keep you safe all the time. The tweet you're referencing was a picture that someone took in New York City, I think on the Upper West Side, of a Best Buy. And the sign outside, in essence, said, there is still risk of transmission. And it's like, well, yes, life has risk. You could walk outside of your house, especially if you live in New York City, outside of your apartment, and get hit by a car or a bicyclist. But we all do that. You could be struck by lightning. Anything is possible. But they've done this thing where people think, oh, we have to suddenly get the risk down to zero, which is literally impossible. And it's also making people crazy. I mean, what I'm far more worried about, and I've been saying this probably for a year, since the first couple months of COVID, I am now far more worried about the psychological damage that the lockdowns, the restrictions, the craziness of social media and what our corporate press has done to people than I am about COVID. That's not to diminish the people that died, and we know that most of them had comorbidities and were of a certain age and all of that stuff. But in essence, we destroyed the world. We destroyed the world as we know it. That world, Dana, a year and a half ago, remember those good old days? Well, man, wouldn't we all love to go back to that? But it ain't coming back. And I'm far more worried about the psychological damage of people that will now be afraid to go outside and afraid to talk to people. And just even that, I went to a party in crazy Los Angeles last night, about 100 people. It happened to be outside, but people were not wearing masks and we were hugging and talking. But everybody said the same thing, which is, wow, it's so wild to just talk to strangers. Like, it's so crazy that we're actually just talking to each other again. There is going to be a psychological adjustment, and man, we have a lot. This is not going to be something that we just get through 1 week after we fully open. This is going to, I think, be years. And what we've done to young people and kids, I mean, you have young kids watching my nieces and nephews in masks, and it's not good. It's not good.
It's tough. It's tough stuff. I know, and it is weird. It does, and it feels weird that people aren't used to it. I mean, that's how we lived up, people are afraid to live. That's how we lived up until just, a year ago. Dave Rubin, well, when you come to Texas,
Dana,
we'll go to the range.
2 years ago, if someone was walking down the street in a mask, you'd avoid the guy, right? Now we flipped the script on everything. Something ain't right.
Now we're like, oh, now it's safe. He's wearing a face diaper. That's great. 6 feet of masks. That works wonderfully. Dave Rubin, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much. Good to see you.
Good seeing you, Dana.
All right, folks, could the pandemic have been over sooner if the FDA hadn't gotten in the way? All those government regulations. We will next speak with Matt Welch, who is editor-at-large of Reason. He's also the host of Reason Roundtable when we come back. So after the show, I want you all to go to this website, preparewiththefirst.com. It's a special website set up by our friends at My Patriot Supply. And because every day it seems like things are just getting nuttier out there, people are crazy, best way to have a peace of mind throughout all of this is to have a supply of emergency food and water. Now, My Patriot Supply is America's leading preparedness company. They are here to help you become more self-reliant, no matter what happens next. But you can't wait for something bad to happen and then react. You should act now before we see, say, like a stock market crash or hyperinflation or civil unrest or a natural disaster. My Patriot Supply has been in business for over a dozen years, serving millions of families and earning 39,000 4-star and 5-star reviews. Their food is specially packaged to stay fresh for up to 25 years, so when you prepare it today, it'll be there when you need it. Right now, save $50 on their 4-week emergency food kit at preparewiththefirst.com. The meals are delicious. They provide 2,000 calories per day. No other brand comes close. That's preparewiththefirst.com. We're pleased to welcome my friend Matt Welch, editor-at-large for Reason and host of the Reason Roundtable podcast. Now, he just ran a piece titled, "The Pandemic Could Have Been Over Much Sooner If Not for the FDA." And I actually agree. I have a lot of questions about that. Matt, good to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Nice to see you, Dan. It's been a long time.
I know it has been. And I was amazed at whenever this all started, and I think it began with the PPE situation and how regulated PPE was and how masks were considered something, and that's why they had to be marketed a different way or had to be sold or packaged a different way. And I'm thinking there are people, we don't know what this virus is totally, where everybody's all scrambling, trying to figure it out. And we were all tripping over these government regulations. And I know that you had talked about that early on as well. Explain a little bit, when you say that the FDA dragged this out, how soon are we talking? We could have had some of this stuff solved. We could have had maybe the mask situation solved, some of the tests, some of the processing for that, without the big bad FDA involved in everything.
From the jump, I think the biggest mistake was the lack of testing. The FDA and the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, basically had a monopoly on who could run a test or how a test would be administered. And this is back in January, February, and March, right? You remember back then, everyone was mad at the NBA or sports teams because they had access to tests, because tests are these incredibly scarce things. Unlike in places like Germany. Germany just said, hey, look, these are the guidelines. Whoever wants to supply those tests, great, thank you. But the CDC was hoarding this and the FDA was hoarding this too. And so we basically had a monopoly shortage of this. And when you don't know who's infected, and I'm in New York, this is where the epicenter was for quite some time, that was the problem. We couldn't tell. and so he had to ration tests. This was a huge mistake because it made us unable to see how big the problem was at the time. Then the two other main things that the FDA did wrong were both vaccine related. Yes, we got vaccines a lot better than almost all of the rest of the world. And some of that is thanks to the Trump administration and Trump himself doing Operation Warp Speed. But even then, like, the FDA doesn't exactly work on warp speed. They had two opportunities. One was to do human challenge trial, which would basically allow people, you could test this a lot faster. And some other countries have done. The UK has done that. We decided not to do it because it's a bit controversial. And then the other one that just sticks in my craw is that Pfizer was ready November 20th. That's when they handed in the application. The FDA board that sat and said, okay, we're going to review this, met on December 10th. People are dying every day from this. You know, you think you might want to speed up the meeting, but bureaucracies don't work that way. They don't become nimble overnight. And what really bothers me about it overall is the way that we all talk in this country about government reaction to COVID via our view on the personalities. Like, we don't like Trump, it's his fault. We love Fauci, he's great, or vice versa. You know, we hate Fauci, we love Trump. Where, like, no, it's the FDA and the CDC, and it explains a lot what happened based on their own kind of bureaucratic pathways and ineptitude.
One of the most enraging stories that I read at the start of this, Matt, and this goes into what you were talking about with the testing, and it had to do with the Seattle Flu Center, this hospital, this lab in Seattle, where this researcher, this doctor, they were testing just for flu, widespread testing for flu. But when they realized what was happening with this potential pandemic before it was declared such, they thought, maybe let's start trying to figure out how we can test for coronavirus, for these things. And in fact, I think they were some of the first to actually develop the test that came back with positives. But they were given a cease and desist because it wasn't a certified clinical lab. It wasn't a clinically certified lab that worked with FDA and went by CDC regulations. And it just seemed like a bunch of bureaucracy. And they wanted them to stop trying to figure out ways to create these tests and make it to where we could develop this faster and get them in hands across the country faster. I mean, at that point, and I don't want to be reductive, but it's like, are you for bureaucracy or saving lives? I mean, which is it?
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of these agencies believe that their bureaucracy is the tool for saving lives. It's what keeps us safe. But these are sort of self-reinforcing ideas. This is giving the bureaucrat more power, and so they can slow things down. I mean, to this day, if you go on Twitter or anywhere else and criticize the FDA, for example, for holding the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as it did for a couple of weeks there, which it turned out I think was pretty overblown fears about its side effects. People will say, you know, they will immediately appeal to the authority of people who oversee a process that they themselves do not understand, just because someone in a white lab coat from the government said this is how it should be. We should be scrutinizing all of this as lay people, as journalists. We shouldn't take anybody's word for it, and we should allow for citizen kind of complaints about all of this. I would point out again, I'm someone who is not a fan of Donald Trump, as you know, your viewers might not. And again, everyone was personalizing this with him. If you look at it, see what the government did really, really wrong. It was, as we mentioned, slowing testing and slowing vaccines. What did Donald Trump say in two, not just one, of his State of the Union addresses? This is before COVID. He made a point of saying the FDA needs to try drugs faster. Of whatever you can say about his erratic proclamations and his daily press conferences, which were kind of not the best thing in the world, and different kind of messaging, he's always had a sense of that the FDA needs to join the 21st century. In many ways, these vaccines, which are miraculous, are very much a 21st century kind of thing. But our systems have to get there, which is something that Trump himself was pushing for before the coronavirus hit.
Yeah, he had pushed that right to try, talking with Matt Welch of Reason. Matt, you said something that I really liked and I thought made a lot of sense, that a lot of these agencies believe that their bureaucracy is ultimately, that helps to save lives. And I keep hearing that with, you know, you mentioned the Johnson & Johnson thing where it was like something out of 6.5 million people that had clotting issues, and then there was a lot of weeping and gnashing of the teeth, and we have to put a pause on it, and it was just, the messaging was awful. But to that point, there are some people out there that say, well, you know, the long lead in that the FDA has for this stuff, that just actually helps test and vet these vaccines. I'm not necessarily bought into that line of thinking. What do you say to those people who act like, and I don't even know if that what they even do during that waiting process, but they act like that's all part of vetting the vaccine and the vaccination process?
I mean, having extra time allows you to have extra time, sort of tautologically, but we shouldn't make the assumption that that extra time is being used wisely. In some cases, you are. You're waiting for the effects to happen or to not happen on patients. But if it's literally, you know, I'm not going to schedule a meeting for 20 days, that's not allowing anything to happen fast at all. And another thing that it does, all of these things, including the choke point on testing early on, is that it puts the CDC, especially, in the position of trying to manage behavior rather than tell the truth. If you look, the CDC had a great document from 2006, I believe it was, talking about what to do in the next big pandemic. And one of the things that they underscored from the beginning was what we have to do is level with the American people about what we know and what we don't know, what we expect, what we think about risk, what we don't know yet about risk, all of this stuff. But just be truthful and let people be adult about making decisions. CDC, from the beginning and to this day, with Rochelle Walensky and her disastrous comments about the way that the COVID is allegedly spread outdoors, which informs their masking policies outside. It's all about shaping behavior. So when there was a shortage of tests, Fauci was saying things like, well, not everyone needs to get tested. All right, because he didn't want everyone to be like soaking up testing. Same thing with masks, like, oh, masking isn't important when we don't have a lot of masks and we're worried about a shortage. No, I want the CDC to tell me the truth. What we've seen throughout this process, continuing to this very day and hour, is that they're not geared towards that. Public health is geared towards managing you rather than giving you the information to manage yourself.
Yes, and you have people who want to eliminate all risk, which, and the individuals that are making these decisions in these bureaucratic agencies, that they're focusing on the risk, whereas, you know, the elected officials are supposed to weigh that according to individual liberties to make sure that that is not being canceled out by eliminating risk. It can be a tricky thing, and obviously the messaging gets messed up when you have some of these, you know, bureaucrats like Fauci and others that are talking about eliminating, you know, and containing the spread. But, you know, they're not politicians. They're not looking at individual liberties. One thing on this too, Matt, the difference between having something, you know, these vaccines, as I understand it, and correct me where you find me wrong on this, we have emergency authorization, which is why people are able to go out and get the vaccines that they're getting. But what happens, I mean, at what point does it become officially not just emergency authorized, but just authorized in general? What's taking so long with that? I would think, you know, millions of people already have it. Is that not good enough?
I don't know what the procedure is on what makes an emergency, what makes not an emergency. I think clearly we're going to have these vaccines. I wish that we would also have AstraZeneca, which has been sitting in, you know, warehouses outside of Baltimore or wherever it's been. In addition to that, we should have as many of these vaccines available as humanly possible. And again, just if you look everywhere at Israel, at the UK, at the United States, the thing that bends the curve, that is, you know, wrestled this thing down the fastest, is just the vaccine. That is, and the rollout thereof. Everything about the government's mind should have been bent in the direction of doing this for such a long time. In addition to, and you're right to point this out, being realistic about risks, including not trying to scare people into imagining that this thing is like out there killing kids. I know you as a parent have probably gnashed your teeth listening to all the messaging from people on about a disease that has killed, what, 400 people or so who are 18 and under, like far fewer that have been killed by the flu in many seasons for kids. And yet we've done all of this terrible, terrible policy making and kind of scaremongering that's only now kind of beginning to unclench a little bit, but it's had just devastating impact on our kids. And I think we're going to be looking back for years to come wondering how we screwed that up so bad.
Yeah, last question on that point. You mentioned, you know, I really do. I feel bad for kids. I feel bad for teens. I feel bad for those who are kind of stuck in that position of they're about to leave the nest, but then it kind of got delayed, and so they're in this weird, you know, purgatory period. There was a story. I think it was in Southern California, and I can't exactly remember what beach, if it was Huntington Beach, but a skate park. This was I guess, like several months into, or a couple months into that 15 days to slow the spread. And the city went in, and they didn't want anybody out there skateboarding at the skate park because, they have no idea how it spread, but they're positive you can probably catch it by skateboarding. And so they dumped sand into the skate park, and these kids, these skater kids, were not having it. So they showed up the next day with shovels, and they shoveled all of the sand out of the skate park. And I thought, looking back at all these lockdowns, did our government just inadvertently create a bunch of, constitutionally minded people? I mean, do you think, Matt, that teens now are going to realize, you remember when they dumped sand in the skate park? You remember when we couldn't have prom? Remember when we, couldn't, graduate? What impact is that going to play in the psyche of America's youth in shaping politics forward?
I would hope so. As the father of a 12-year-old, and I know a lot of parents of 12-year-olds, they've all become creepy shut-ins. 12 is a bad age in general. And like if there's an excuse to sit in your room and look at a screen, you're going to do that no matter what the pandemic situation is. So it's going to take a long time to get the masks off their face, probably. It's good. It will happen. But yeah, you're right. I think specifically the 16, 17, 18-year-olds and the parents I know of those people, they feel like they've had the wool taken off their eyes. The world of adults has failed them, and they know this. And so it'll be interesting to see what the long-term kind of political effect or souring, but we've really done damage to these kids. And I feel so badly about it. So many of the kids were playing sports and thought that they were going to get into a college. They built their lives around a thing, and the thing got derailed. And a lot of it got derailed because the adults couldn't manage and evaluate risk properly at all. Wow. So it's a darn shame. And I hope they are able to snap back.
I do too. The kids were not all right throughout all of this. Matt Welch, Good to see you, my friend. I appreciate you joining me.
Nice to see you, Dana.
Hope to talk to you again soon. Take care.
Yep.
When we come back, folks, corporate America has gone all in on corporatizing Pride Month. We have some thoughts about that because I'm just like, if you're going to make a product, make a good product. I saw an eyeshadow palette that was one of the worst, most awful things I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, you're going to want to stick around to hear. Back in a second. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company serving premium coffee just like this to people who love America and need caffeine badly. Veteran CEO and founder Evan Hafer spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with U.S. Special Forces and as a CIA contractor. Black Rifle Coffee, they're committed to Evan's vision of supporting veteran law enforcement and first responder causes. In our country and overseas, frontline workers risk their lives every day. So inspired by their courage, Black Rifle Coffee is giving back to those who serve however they can. So throughout May, Black Rifle Coffee is rallying behind firefighters, first responders, active duty military, and other frontline workers by spotlighting local heroes through community nominations, donating coffee to keep the front lines caffeinated. I've had like one whole of these and maybe another, and also giving back to organizations that support our nation's heroes. Their high quality coffee beans are imported from all over the world, then roasted 5 days a week. You can also get these in a can at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah, bringing you the freshest coffee in America. So head to blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV to order yours today. Use code DanaTV at checkout to get 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Well, it's Pride Month in America, and that means one thing. Rainbow capitalism is on full display. That's right, every corporation in America wants you to know how much they care so very much about the alphabet people, the LGBTQIA+ community. They care deeply about every last letter in that ever-growing acronym, and they're not going to stop at anything to show their devotion and love for those communities. Case in point, Lego, with their brand new Rainbow Plastic People. It's available now. Hurry, parents. Your kid won't have to wait till Christmas to get their hands on these faceless, little, terrifying plastic people. Here's a quote, by the way, from Lego about them. They said, quote, it's terrifying. Everyone is unique with a little more love, acceptance, and understanding in the world, and we can all feel more free to be our true, awesome selves. And that's Matthew Ashton, Lego's vice president of design, who said that. Now, I'm not sure that this non-binary set of Lego people is going to increase acceptance. However, we are sure that the kids, the people that actually play with Legos, what do you do with them? I mean, they don't have faces. But hey, this is Pride Month. And right now, corporations don't care about kids. It's all about virtue signaling. And not to be outdone in the virtue signaling arms race for Pride Month is another corporation, Kellogg's, and their amazing box of cereal that is deepening understanding and advancing the rights of people of all different sexual orientations. They're calling this intersectional box of Fruit Loops shaped as hearts Together with Pride. The entire spectrum of the rainbow is represented on this box. Indeed, Kellogg's full cast of cereal mascots have come out in support of this sugary pride parade. Although who is identifying as what is totally unknown. And don't you dare assume that you know either. None of them have announced their gender pronouns, not even Diggum, the Pepe Frog, whatever, from Honey Smacks. Is right. Although gender pronouns are featured prominently on the side of the box, so your kid can swallow some gender identity indoctrination while getting a sugar high. That's helpful. So it's encouraging to see the Kellogg's cereal mascots demonstrating their allyship and their pride. Although we wonder what took the flamboyant Tony the Tiger with his ascot and Toucan Sam so long to come out and snap, crackle, and pop, if we had to guess. I don't know if that's like some sort of like polyamorous relationship. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, as Jerry Seinfeld once said. Word on the street is those little elves are angry that there's no E yet represented in LGBTQIA+. That's wrong, and Kellogg should petition to change that injustice. But bigger question, we wonder, is anybody buying all this? Are the people of the rainbow buying this even? I mean, do you really think that these companies actually care, or do these corporations just want to buy some cheap virtue, boost their bottom line, and give the queer community diabetes while they're at it? We think all this corporate virtue signaling is about as empty as the calories inside that box. It's also off-putting. It's like enough to turn the entire LGBTQIA+ community straight, just to get as far away from all this corporatization as possible. But kidding aside, we have another question. Does Kellogg's and Lego really think that this is appropriate for kids? I mean, seriously, most adults can't even explain the thinking behind this new sexual revolution. These are ideas that were invented like 2 days ago in some gender studies department at Columbia University. Ideas like announcing your pronouns, and there are dozens of genders and non-binary people. What do these companies think that they're doing, jamming this in front of your kids, all kids? I mean, do they even consider that maybe most Americans still believe in crazy notions like science, like there's actually two genders, or that sex may actually be binary? And why does sexuality and sexual politics belong in Legos and on kids' cereal boxes at all? Who exactly is corporate America targeting? Is the gay community consuming lots of GMO-saturated sugar cereal, really? Or is corporate America after our kids' minds? We leave it to you to decide. Some quick prayers up tonight for my executive producer of my radio program, Kane, who was in a bad car wreck this evening. So we'll keep you updated about his condition, but prayers up for his quick recovery. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you back here tomorrow for more. God bless, and don't bend the knee.